Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, as we continue our conversation on the future of the country and a few other important developments, including the fact that the president has now spent 2 years, I have with me a very eminent Nigerian politician, scholar, and writer who was actually the founding national secretary of the Alliance for Democracy. I'd like to welcome to Inside Sources the distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Professor Udenta O. Udenta. Prof,
Well,
welcome to Inside Sources.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
It's good to have you here at last.
Thank you. Yes. It took a while, but
Exactly.
I'm happy we're here together.
Thank you so much. So we start by just looking at where Nigeria is today. If you look at where we are today, where do you think we are going? Do you think we are headed to that destiny that we all know is our preferred destination of greatness?
A very deep philosophical question. It just threw at me like a bomb. How do I grapple with it? There are many sides or domains of life, or space of life. We can build, undergird this your comment around. Is it economic? Is it human capital development? Is it educational sector? Is it health? Is it the philosophical foundation of the Nigerian state? Is it constitutional order? For me, the critical element in underscoring this question and then pursuing that kind of vision of the future where this country is headed is the constitutional framework around which you build your democratic tradition. We have a presidential system that is supposed to manage our liberal democracy in a federal format. If you don't get the democracy right, at the level of philosophical conception of the democracy, you cannot get any other thing right. Marx, for example, Karl Marx, which of course you and I know very well, that the history of every hitherto existing society is a history of class struggle. But all class struggle is a political struggle, even with the economic. So if you don't sort out the politics of the moment and of the future, you can't sort out the economics or any other factor of national life. So if you don't get the politics right, you can't get any other thing right in the future. We haven't gotten Nigeria right because we haven't gotten the politics right. The economic foundation is the base, I understand, but that base is managed. Human resources, capital resources, and so on, natural resources are managed by a group of individuals. In the democracy, they represent the people, they have a social contract with them. But what kind of democracy are you practicing? At the highest level of democratic explanation, you can say liberal democracy of the Western hue was implanted not only in Nigeria, but in Africa as a cure to the big man syndrome. Remember the big man of Arab Moi, of Bokassa, of Idi Amin, and so on, who they believed polluted the African political landscape, in personalized power, and be very authoritarian and very liberal in managing statecraft. So we needed to take a step back from that and implanted liberal democracy through the process of democratization, late 80s, early 90s. But almost 20-something, 30-something years, liberal democracy has failed Africa. Not in terms of its normative claims, liberty, pursuit of liberty and happiness, free press, constitutional order, rule of law, etc. These are normative claims. But in practice, it has never worked out. It hasn't worked out because it's an imposition. Remember the logic of the present conversation of Obasanjo himself is leading. How do we have an African-centered democratic tradition that leverages or privileges our past, our historical journey, our evolutionary pattern and trend, and not just something from outside? So when you crafted the presidential system in a liberal democratic format and say, power Nigerian history, power Nigerian development to the future, it can work. So that's a deep way of looking at it. In more practical terms, you can begin to splinter down what kind of constitution. We have a federal system because we have a diverse group of people, multinational, multi-religious, multicultural environment. So you need a constitution that reflects this unity and unipolarities. We don't have that. This constitution is only federal in name, but unitarist in content. That's one big problem.
Well, I mean, that's let's take that as an opening comment, and let me, kind of divert it more towards what you think ought to happen. I mean, you quoted Karl Marx, and Karl Marx also said that philosophers have interpreted the world
in various ways.
The point is to change it.
To change it.
How do we change this trajectory, Prof?
Now, when nations face existential crisis, you don't summon politicians. You don't summon business people or corporate leaders. A nation summons its intellect. China summoned its intellect when it was caught in a mix. First, how do you come out of Japanese imperial conquest of China? How then do we come out of the cruel period of the Civil War? When Chimamanda launched the Long Revolution, to launch the Cultural Revolution, when China stabilized as a nation that won independence in 1949, the key question was, how do we move China from that phase of convulsive cultural and social disorder to an order of modernity? So the Deng Xiaoping in 1978, with the death of Chiao Mao in 1976, formulated with a group of thinkers a new direction in China, for China. What they call it? Practice overcomes contradictions, which means whatever you do, whether it is in the mysticism, spirituality, whatever it is, capitalism, that helps China. It helps to elevate the human standard. It helps to lift up the spirit of the people. It helps to industrialize and modernize China. It's acceptable. And they classified it as socialism or Marxism with Chinese characteristics. Now, 30, 40 years, where do you have China now under Xi Jinping, towering virtually beyond the realm of humanity? China has gone almost ballistic, to use the current Nigerian expression. Because they saw the future. That future is, how do we construct a society that is modern, that is efficient, that is productive, where we can lift millions out of poverty by leveraging on our history, on our civilization, and on our interrelations with the rest of the world. We borrow from Marxism, we borrow from capitalism, we borrow from the mysticism, from Taoism, from Confucianism, all are mixed together to create a new China. In Nigeria, we must summon the intellect of Nigerian people. Where are the scholars in political science and strategic studies? Where are the scholars in development studies? These are the ones, not theory. This time, we sit down with any government, with the government of the day, not this one, for example, any other government of the day that is interested in working for the future of the country.
Right.
We have to first and foremost, get our ideological direction, philosophical direction, constitutional direction, the kind of democracy that will work for Nigeria. If you get that and fix it, you will have a situation in which 30 years, 20 years, 40 years, we'll expect an exponential growth in terms of human development index. We expect a reduction in poverty. We expect many components of multidimensional poverty. We expect people having a better life, measurable in every human sphere. But because of an indolent mindset, federalism in this country is a settled issue for many. The presidential system is almost cast in iron, almost canonical. It's something which can't append. The way and manner the state, the subnational relates with the federal center is something which has been defined and nothing can ever change. The moment you find this same level of finality in terms of propositions about how Nigeria we march on, it can never make progress.
Okay, Prof. I mean, let's and I really find this quite insightful, especially what you said about the Chinese saying that
experiment.
Say practice
overcomes contradictions.
Contradiction. Very, very interesting. And I want to adjust that even practice at times even overcomes confession.
Okay.
Because you can say certain things and do a different thing, which is where I want to ask you this question. You were the founding National Secretary of the Alliance for Democracy.
Sure.
And that party, I recollect very well, came out of the struggle for democracy with NADECO, with Eastern Mandate Union, and Afenifere, coming together to define this kind of thought, came out of this kind of thought that you have just articulated. What happened to that idea? How did it die?
What happened is that this today, in my moment of rationality, and everybody has moments of rationality, sometimes moments of fancy, and the instinctual thoughts.
Right.
You ask yourself, this debate about restructuring, beyond the theoretical, horizon of it, can it work? It's difficult to work. It's almost impossible to work. I don't want to disillusion anybody before I answer a question more directly. Okay. Why is it so? You need a gap in the constitutional order for you to restructure, or else the government of the day must self-implode as a deliberate, intentional choice, the way Fujimori did in Peru in 1992 or 1993. It's a history I do not want to repeat on stage with you here in this studio. A guy won an election, but they didn't like the constitutional order that he inherited and needed something better, and we know what he did. Let's leave it at that. If any government is not prepared to pursue that radical restructuring or reconstruction of the state in that direction, how then do you achieve a sense of restructuring when there is closure at the level of governance? There's a president, we have governors, local government chairmen, and other apparatuses of state governance.
Right.
There's no way. And the Constitution permits itself to be amended only in a particular direction. The direction of constitutional amendment can never yield a restructured Nigerian state. So there are two authorities you have to do to restructure. I do not want, again, to go into details in there. One of them would be to overwhelm the state in some sort of direction in order to create that opening. That's what we had in 1998. Abiola won election. He didn't realize his mandate.
1993.
He won in 1993. He won an election in 93. But about 1998, when he died,
right.
he didn't realize his mandate when he died in 98. And Abacha, who was sub power, died too. There was no democratic constitution. There was no civil order. Absalom Abubakar stepped in because the boys in that state come and step in. In essence, that was a moment of restructuring for the country. Because there was no constitution, there was no democracy.
Right.
And that's what Alliance for Democracy proposed. Actually, the coalition of democratic forces, Nadeko, Isabande Union, Afenifere, and some other mass democratic movements said, we will not participate in the pyrotechnics of a transition program. They usually leave the ban on politics, leave the ban on politicians, form new political parties, set out a timetable, hold elections, swear people in, and after 2, 3, 4 years, another disaster. Let us restructure Nigeria now. That's opportunity because Absalom Abubakar, you're not supper. He didn't win any election. He have no mandate. The man with the mandate had died.
Right.
In a sense, rather than a regular transition, let us have government of national unity. They now have a sovereign national conference. That's what Nadeko took to him.
Right.
He was very smart. He said, I have no mandate, as you rightly said. Neither do you have a mandate. Our brother with the mandate is dead. So what we do now, it must then climb down from your high intellectual and ideological horse, form a party, and then implement this agenda. Rather than governing the country alone with absolute mandate, form a government of national unity. Rather than implementing the constitution we're giving you, show this aside and do a sovereign national conference. Brilliant argument, nonetheless. Our leaders and all of the younger ones went and formed Alliance for Democracy. But if you're not part of Absalom's government, you will never be part of the new order. So the PDP that emerged out of the womb of that government, was populated by people in that government. So you have to now find a logical, sequential movement from a military era to a militarized democratic format in which Obasanjo, another military leader, became president. Danjuma became, Minister of Defense. Jagaguzo became NSA. Abdullahi became Chief of Staff in order to hold the state together.
Right.
So AD now became
the opposition.
A fringe party, no longer a mainstream party with only 6 states to contend with in the Southwest. The process of implosion through various stages of internecine warfare is a story for another day. So
but just to follow up on that, and thank you so much for this insight. I remember that right on this show, before he died, Chief Ayo Adebanjo, who was also involved.
He was a founding deputy national chairman,
Yeah.
ultimately became the chairman of the party.
Right. He said, on this show to me that one of the things that the Alliance for Democracy and Afenifere and all the people agreed was that when the governors were elected in 1999, and I want to check that with you, I'm sure he knows what he's saying, but I want to get your take. He said that the decision was that after the governors were elected, that they should insist that they should not go to Abuja, that they should insist on a new constitution, just like you said, a sovereign national conference. He said that was the agreement, but he said the governors, they bailed out. Do you remember that?
Let's put it this way. The facts may lock somewhere in between. Adebanjo was a grand, the theoretician of a certain kind of political order and an ideologue of our struggle. And of course, his passage heralded, for me, the exit of a season of greatness of mind and largeness of heart. But the facts of the matter will lie in between. Our theoretical suppositions and wish as ideological force in AD can be matched with the brutal reality the governors were confronted with. You have 6 governors out of 36.
Yeah.
You're already in the minority. You cannot assist governors from the particular region of the country, hurting from years of destabilization and disorder and pain and anguish. And many went into exile, many died. And some people like us suffered massive detention because of support for democracy. And so these 6 governors will hold back the implementation of the result of the transition with the president sworn in, another governor sworn in, how the heck can you stop the march of this kind of democracy, as crazy as that democracy then was? What he can do is to persuade the rest of the other governors in the governors for me to say, hey, we participated in this process of change for the sake of it, for national stability. Now we've gotten there. Let us use the instrumentality of the offices we hold to call for this restructuring sovereign national conference. They tried to do so, but of course it was impossible to realize that dream. That's why I'm talking about closure.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the constitution was all about. We didn't even read it as leaders of the party. We just inherited the document. They hurried to take it immediately out of the space.
So if you remember that, even at the time Obasanjo was being sworn in 1999, there was no clean copy of that constitution.
So who the heck cared? It's now in future we are caring. We should have cared more then than we are doing now.
But I wanted to also bring out one important point. So you guys formed Alliance for Democracy. You were the founding national secretary. And the man who is currently today the president was a founding member, was actually the one that emerged as the governor of Lagos State in that 1999.
Yes.
With all the ideals that, most of you shared, and even people like us who were...
elected with the emergence of AD as a new force,
exactly.
as a new kind of party.
So the progressive arm of the country was clearly, in tune with what AD was doing.
Yeah.
What do you think then happened that we now have Bola Tinubu, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, who was governor then, who was an AD, went to become AC later? Why is it that after 2 years, we haven't seen a clear direction that goes to this idea? In your own view, what do you think is happening?
Okay, first and foremost, if you go back into history, because historical memory making or historicization of extant realities is very crucial in underscoring contemporary realities. AD failed in its mission of change because of what you can call a brutal contestation between the regionalist mindset and the propensity by the rest of us for a bigger national claim. We didn't see the ADs rooted within the Western region as dominant as the party was there. From the tradition of Awoism right through to UPN and then through to the Alliance for Democracy. We urged for a much more inclusive pan-national movement that would recognize and respect diversities. That struggle was very intense. It exhausted the moral principles and authority of AD and ultimately imploded its organizational structure. The governors who emerged, including Bola Tinubu, who emerged as the governor of the party, ultimately found themselves, in a situation in which the party no longer could represent that sense of coherence. That sense of coherence being the founding spirit of the party, the direction of the party, post-2003. If you recall, the party didn't feel a candidate reasonably as it were in 2003. The simple reason is that they wanted to cut a deal with the president, who didn't get much out of his own zone base in 1999. They didn't want that repeated again in 2003. So you outsmarted our party leaders and cut that kind of deal. But at the end of the day, he told them to flush everybody out. Except Lagos that survived. So the burden was then on that Lagos to now marshal the forces available, pull the resources he could, and then begin that journey. From that, you find that a level of contamination will begin to occur. That contamination is not of the soul of the heart, but of understanding of power. The transition from AD to AC, AD to ACN, ACN to APC was not a logical sequence of ideological growth or progression, but a practical, search for an SPV, special purpose vehicle that would drive the quest for power. So the weakening of the ideological, aura of that period, and then the emergence of what you can call an Miloku spirit, which is now predominant and preeminent in the governing infrastructure of the day, is what you can say that corrupted that original spirit of AD being an engine of change, a progressive direction for the country, to where you find today the struggle to even find the bearing. What kind of direction is the presidency of Abana Ahmed taking the country to? What economic plan do we have? What is the framework that has been carefully constructed, like mixed document, least document? Where do we feed these economic options into the NEPAD agenda from 2001 to now? So if you look at all that, and then in terms of the political space, you find that the shrinking, that's not what we urged for under AD. Those are those who went on exile, those who suffered detention here. Now you find in the rise of the hybrid regime, what they call this competitive authoritarianism, It's neither democratic, neither it is completely authoritarian in nature.
Right.
Shutting down democratic spaces, manacling the media, destabilizing multi-party democratic framework by inducing crisis in other parties. That's not the spirit of Eddie.
Okay.
That's an Emiloku
All right.
spirit.
Very, very interesting, and we're going to go up to that. But I wanted to ask, so you left AD in 2001. Why did you leave? So you left even before that, the 2000.
Yes, of course, but I still remain I still remain very influential in the face of AD for years to come.
Imagine, yeah.
Beyond to, I remember, for example, when Uncle Bala was crudely assassinated.
Right.
It should be later in 2001.
Right.
It should be November, thereabout.
In December, actually.
About December.
Yeah.
So I had left office months back.
Before that?
Yes, before then. The new chairman of the party, A. Abdul Kadir, was summoned or invited by the DG, DSS, and IGP to come and have a conversation because he died in his house and there were crises in the party in the Southwest and in Osun State. To know whether the crisis in the party could have played a role in what ultimately happened to him in that tragic fashion.
Okay.
He called me to come along with him. He told the DG, DSS then, Dr. Kayode, he said, I can't come and talk to you alone. It's only Udenta that can talk about the party. I'm just a new chairman. We went to see IGP Musli Smith, 2001.
Wow.
And Smith said, Udenta, I have your file. It's from this ground to this level. The same way that I will say your file is from this ground to this level, but for good reason. Not because you're a dupe or a fraudster, but you suffered for the country. You're a patriot. So you suffered detentions multiple times. Can we have an insight into this question you're asking me? What happened to the party? What could have led to this? The point I'm making is that even when I had left almost 7-8 months back, I was still called upon to shed light. That persisted in 2003, 2007 before the divorce became complete. What happened was that the moment AD decided to call it some sort of a deal, not a Frankenstein kind of deal, but some sort of a Mephistophelian deal. If you know Mephistopheles, Mephistopheles, of course, was the devil that cut a deal with Dr. Faustus, who was a philosopher, a theologian, a doctor of medicine and science, but wanted more in life. He said, let's go to the devil and cut a deal so that I can become more powerful and preeminent. And he became dominant, punishing kings and popes. But then they would say, so time, you want to die. He said, give me life, but time was coming. And he said, can I change this deal? He couldn't change the deal anymore. He suffered the face of finality of death. I'm not talking about devil in the sense of a literal sense.
Right.
PDP wasn't the devil in that sense, but I'm just giving some mythical example that AD cut a deal with the president and his party, PDP, and said, we can survive together in the Southwest and across the country.
Right.
We help you to become re-elected, and then you help us to retain our power in the Southwest. They fulfill a part of the obligation. The other one didn't fulfill part of the bargain. So the rest, as they say, is history. So where we are today upon reflection is that AD, as a method in which you form a party, in which you reason argument, in which you develop thesis to govern a state, in which you try to marshal your ideas to say, what kind of vision do you have? If you go back to your first question, what kind of Nigeria are we anticipating in future? What kind of children and grandchildren, we're going to have? What kind of environment will they inhabit? That was AD then. But ultimately, with the decay of the political infrastructure in Nigeria and the fragmentation of the political order, in fact, that even Bola Tinubu himself, as the former governor of Lagos State and currently the president there, had to move with the wind flow. The flow, how did the wind blow? He moved with the political wind blowing you wherever he goes. So whenever he takes you to power, he's going to cling on to. He will not become an ideological vote to say, I will not resist, I will resist. This kind of level of contamination.
Okay, let's talk about that contamination, and let's talk about it in a more realistic sense.
Okay.
And I like your philosophical underpinnings, but for the benefit of our people, let's bring it down.
Okay.
So, for instance, do you grant, to the president that he has managed, in spite of his other weaknesses, he has managed to be a consistent politician who stood in opposition from that 2003 all the way to 2015. Do you grant that? And if you do or you don't you see a difference in his own model, with his strengths and weaknesses? compared to some of these other characters in opposition who don't seem to know how to stay in one place. At least Bola Tinubu stood in opposition from 2003 to 2015. Do you grant him that credit?
Well, let me put it this way, almost as if a mind reader. I had a conversation repeatedly with some of my political associates, my friends for many years, some outside the country. And I see if I'm going to go on television with what is going on with the opposition parties, with the defections, gale of defections, and a certain level of what I can consider political idiocy in terms of this mindless, spineless kind of politics we play now.
Yeah.
That he can say something for the president, as harsh as I have to be in many regards with the kind of governance, method he has put out, the pain in the land, the suffering of the people for 2 years, an unremitting regime, of social disorder and then increased security threats. The list can go on and on. What will not recommend me to support this president or even say a good word about it. But the only thing I can talk about is what you said. I said, you grant that to him. That in 1990, in 2003, when he managed to get out of that solve himself there, he didn't run to Abuja to say mainstream himself into the center. Like the governor of Delta State and the former governor said, we need to take our people to the center. An oil-producing state, stupendously rich. 3 main sources of money. Ecology fund comes to you because of the denudation of the environment.
Right.
Special derivation fund, 30% is built into that. Yeah. Then your regular allocation. And you still want to be enslaved, even though in a center that produces nothing and controls nothing in a federal system, in a way. Bola Tinubu did not run to the center. He dug in and began an incremental chipping away of what he felt was an organic power grab by the PDP.
Yeah.
He took Osun. He took Ekiti.
Yeah,
I think moved on to
basically restored,
and so on there. And then dug in as a regional leader and said, I may not get to the presidency as a leader of the southwest axis of the country, but I can now grow the brand. He tested it with Atiku 2007. He was a candidate of ACN.
Right.
2011 was Ribadu from the north again. Yeah. 2015 with Buhari
and won.
And he said, now it's a Milokun time. I have given this to everybody. It's my time to take it. So I have to give that to him.
Yeah.
And I wish the other politicians in the PDP and NNP would learn a lesson from this.
For me.
I said, I will not leave my party, Mr. President.
That's a very important point.
It's a federal system. You run Abuja, I run my state.
Yeah.
The money that comes to me should come to me, not because you want it, so you want to dictate to me.
It's because it's my right.
The Constitution has provided this money for me and my people.
Yeah, I mean.
So when you find what I call the decay of thought in Nigerian political practice, it's shocking and alarming. That's why I still love those people within the party infrastructure of PDP. For example, there was a neck meeting of the party, and I looked at that document signed by the acting chairman of the party and said, wow, Elijah Damagu as the acting chairman of PDP could put it up. It's very strong. Where did that meeting hold? The main meeting is held in the lodge of the Bauchi state governor, chairman of the party's governors forum. That's a certain level of strength. Yeah. To say, you've locked up the main office there.
We'll find a way.
We'll find a way somewhere to do this thing. I wish other members of the party, some other governors too, will learn a lesson. You don't insult the president as a governor. You don't put his government down anyhow. But you stay firm as an independent force to say, you are APC. Mr. President, we respect you as our president. I'm PDP. My task is to rebuild my party, reform my party, rebrand the party as an autonomous political force.
Good.
The governor should understand this.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I share that view with you. And, I want us to now take it to what is happening in the opposition and this idea of one-party state. I'll make a comment and then, you make your take. I don't think, Prof, that Nigeria will ever get to one-party state.
We will not get there.
I don't have that fear. But what do you think is, why do you think the opposition that we have today is so fragmented? I have a theory. I think what Atiku did in 2023, running for president at a time when the country had just had 8 years, in my view, seems to be the original problem of the opposition, especially of PDP. And you have to give people like Wike the credit of fighting him on that. Of course, Wike has his own other shenanigans that we will just put aside. But the point I want to make is that why is it difficult for the opposition, Prof, to simply repeat what Tinubu did?
Okay.
Why is it so difficult?
Now, it's difficult, but it may not be possible. I can tell you about politics. In my place, in Igbo land,
right,
we call it Ndolondolo. Ndorondoro Ochichi. Ochichi is to rule, to govern.
Yes.
Ndorondoro is a struggle
For it.
to govern. You know, it push you like this kind
Yeah.
of game in which you pull me here,
Just
I
like,
pull you
just
there.
like fella said. No, I think it was Shoiga that said, I love my country, I no go land.
Yes.
He push me, I push him.
Push you. So
I no go go.
Ndorondoro means a process, almost a never-ending, inevitable process, as a consequence of change and search for power, and is a lures and accoutrements. Ndorondoro means that every day you meet, you talk, you quarrel, you disagree, you contest. At the end of the day, you come together. Politicians are ghosts. They are malleable, not just in terms of the material essence, morally and ideologically they are weak, but in terms of the spirituality. If you want endorsement by the Northwest APC ahead of time, Mr. President, they will give it to you today. Election is almost 2 years away.
Yeah.
Anything can happen between now and then, and endorsement will become non-endorsement or become fake endorsement.
Cool, yeah.
Politicians who are running away from the parties today may be escaping from some levels of pressure. It could be material pressure, it could be EFCC pressure, it could be ominous pressure, it could be intimidation, it could be money being dangled. We hear stories of special allocations, not the allocation you get every month, something that is kept and say, good governor, please, you collect this extra.
Don't you think that the direction of the country that we desire, don't you think it has to come from outside the political realm? Because of what our political elites have represented, especially since 1999. What we have seen, in my view, is that there's been a lot of personal aggrandizement, policies of personal aggrandizement, up to the point that, like you said, the current president articulated it very clearly in Abeokuta and said that, look, this is what I did. I helped Buhari, I installed all these governors, some of them, to say that, look, it's not the turn of Southwest, and in Southwest, it's my turn. Now, that is an indication of the height of personal aggrandizement in Nigeria's politics. Do you think that we should still expect that the politicians left alone will be able to deliver, even with this coalition, the Nigeria of our desire?
There are two schools of thought. The first school of thought, of course, has to talk about a harmonious, consensual democracy that is devoid of the limits set by liberal democratic order, the Western liberal variant. In 1989, Obasanjo wrote a book, former President Obasanjo, Constitution for National Integration and Development, when he proposed a one-party state. He said if he knew earlier in 76, 77, what he knew when he left office, he wouldn't have gone for a multi-party democracy. That African democratic journey, or philosophical journey, or civilizational journey, evolution, is antithetical to this level of contestation for power.
Do you agree?
Well, I'm saying that was he proposed, and we attacked it viciously from a Marxist perspective, led by Dr. Towango, blessed memory, who wrote Before I Die.
Right.
This debate, with the Obasanjo, the one-party state.
Right.
What he was trying to formulate was a more or less like a Chinese kind of model, in which there are about 18 political parties in China or more, civic groups, labor unions there, but under the leadership of the Communist Party, to build consensual democracy that is cooperative and associational, rather than deep competition as we have in Nigeria today, a winner-take-all syndrome.
Right.
So in which people spend huge amount of money and resources, either litigating, campaigning, bribing, quarreling, fraud. When you have council of elders, council of youth, women, people sitting together agreeing, like we do in the village democratic setting. How do we agree to reach a consensus? Look at the winner-take-all syndrome here. You find the current administration led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who secured 36% or so of the vote, a clear failure. It's an F score. 8 million votes out of 24 million votes, out of 98 million registered voters, out of 230 million Nigerians, he has no mandate. But look at him, on pending established macroeconomic model in the country with enough mandates. Clearly, it is clear. I want anybody to come on studio to say he has a mandate in terms of the population size of the country. But legalistically, he has a mandate because even if 30,000 people voted for presidential election, he has a mandate. That's a legal mandate, not a legitimate mandate. So the difference between legality and legitimacy in political governance. Back to the second model.
But he does have the opportunity of getting
I'm saying that we need to get this thing sorted out because if you have, for example, 36% of the vote, and Atiku then had 28% of the vote, and Obi had 26% of the vote, you will share power in that model. So the first past the goalpost model is gone. It's being eroded by practice. That means he cannot control 100% of the federal government when he had only 36% of the vote. He share it proportionally.
Except that our constitution...
I'm saying that is some part of amendment of the constitution to reflect that.
Right.
But even if you take that aside, the biggest impediment to this kind of growth, this kind of development we're talking about is when there's no ideological choice. When one party reflects the other, the other reflects the other. That means pick and choose. You are in the same basket.
Yes.
But I was having a conversation with one of my ideological allies of years and decades gone by. Owe Lakenfa, you know Owe.
Yes, very well. Yeah.
Owe, I said, come and lead this charge. I'm happy he's going to watch this and say, I'm implicating him and me and others on the left to say, lead this charge on SIM, what they call the Second Independence Movement. From 1960 to now, what are the limits of the post-colony? What are the limits of neo-colonial model of development? What are the limits of this imperialism-induced method in which you find, as you said, exponential growth in personal wealth when the rest of the society is in complete state of destitution? Multidimensional poverty has taken close to maybe 60, 70, 80% of the population. It's because you need an ideological choice different from what you have as a model from 1999 to date. So if you have a party of a new type, which AD was to have become, something distinct that you can say, no, I have PDP, I have APC, I have NMPP, I have Labour, they belong to one ideological basket. I have seen Second Independent Movement as a party belongs to a uniquely different ideological mindset. When they have that new brand mainstreamed and they have bitter contestation between these kind of ideological variables, it will stimulate national development and then bring the best out of the people. If not, politics is going to become a means of production, one easy access and vehicle or for another opportunity or avenue for, as I said, aggrandizement and resource agglutination.
Okay. All right. I mean, thank you, Prof. Let's begin to round up because of our time. I wanted to say that you worked with the AD for 2 years. You know, that
3 years.
3 years from 1998. That's true. 2001. So you certainly must have some.
And then indirectly and informally, maybe to 2003, 2004.
Exactly. So the point is that you did have relationship with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu then.
Oh, sure, we do have relationship. Sure.
Now, if we were to call you today and say, Bro, we were together in the trenches, you know, we formed the party together. What do you think I can do in this balance of 2 years to put Nigeria in the direction that we both want it to go?
One way to answer a question is to watch what I've been saying for the past 1 year. The record is there in public. Ask Mr. President and his team to go to YouTube and click Udenta, and see the enormity of my contribution to national debate in the past 1 year since he took office.
That's not in doubt, Prof.
I'm coming. So that's one way to say, glean my thoughts. I will tell you a strange story. In 1997, Solomon Lau, blessed memory, I think I'm saying it for the first time on television, had some conversation with some people. I don't know what the military assured. We need to sit down with Nadeko and then finalize whatever they wanted to do.
That was 97.
97. And he was a patriot and a Democrat. He believed them.
Yes.
So he came to us. And then we believed him too. Later he was one to say, oh my God, I didn't know these boys were this dastardly and despicable. Because I believed them. He said, sit down with them. So we can now discuss about the modality for how to take down Abacha. At one point, myself told the other leaders in Lagos, we cannot sit down with the military. Civilians and military do not sit down when they want to do something. If it's going to be a patriotic revolutionary eruption carried by them, after they do that, this is a document we have. They should implement it. It's a pro-people document that's going to lead the country from where we are to a better place. So the point is that I cannot hold brief for the president or his team. If you invite a Nigerian, a patriot, and seek advice, of course you give an advice. He will not say because it's the president you don't like or the party you don't like, you don't want the country to succeed. Of course you do want the country to succeed. But when you find that the regime itself is cast in the mode of what I call new messianic mindset, when you find the transmogrification of the individual to that of a god, the presidential system increasingly makes somebody a god of a sort. So if you are now all seeing, all knowing, all conquering, omnipotent, omniscient, then the lesser water like us have even no contribution to make in the way a man want to govern the country. And you can see that for the past 2 years. So governance comes with humility, with a sense of, self-restraint, and a sense of accommodation and inclusion. So when you now make that call, somebody say, oh yeah, you set on the correct path. There could be mistakes here and there. But when there is arrogance in full flight, if you find almost a disdain and contempt for the society and those who populate it, and then their wish is to simply force their way through, as they said in many instances, you can't reject, scorn, and disdain the political class and then lob your policies on the people and it will stick. It will not.
Well,
because you try to overcome the political class and the political state. That's why you find these convulsions. That's why you find this panic to start doing 2027 in 2025.
But what do you think would be that one thing that you think, it should do? One thing, the most important thing.
I have spent an enormous amount of time specifying in various directions. You can't think of one thing you can tell a president to do to uplift the minister of the people
I know.
and bring prosperity. The one thing I can say is not economic, it's not policy. When Obasanjo came in 1999, he won nearly decisively.
Right.
But he didn't govern alone. He didn't say PDP had everything. He said, let's have almost an inclusive government model.
Right.
Let's have a government of national unity of a sort. That's what Soyige, Leton Kubola Ige, Omeke Zive, Badele Jansa into power. So Mohamed Shatta, Mahmoud was the chairman of APP into power. He created Office of Inter-Party. It's the place where you build amity and understanding and cooperation among the political parties to reduce tension and stress in the system. Ultimately, Yaradua created Office of the Civil Society Relations. I said it on many forums. So that's one way to begin. An inclusive model in which everybody has a sense of belonging, even in the contestation of power by the various political parties.
And that aligns with what you had said at the beginning, that, look, the economic base is there, but it's always the political superstructure.
Important.
All right. Now, two more things and then we wrap up. Chief Emeka Anyaku and members of the Patriots, they held a meeting with the president sometimes towards the end of last year, I think October, November, and they seem to have had some kind of understanding, not much of a mandate, but they said that, look, we think that Nigeria should get a new constitution, and we think that that constitution should be determined by a referendum. Now, they have gone ahead to set up committees to
do a conference or a summit of it.
And they've even allied with two senators in the National Assembly, one from the north, one from the south, to co-chair the National Political Summit. What's your view on that? Do you think that might help us to sort out the issue of a constitution that we can say it is actually we the people?
I'm a member of the Patriot.
Okay.
Of the Patriots. And what they're doing is amazing. It didn't start today. Remember the time of F.R.A. Williams and late Ben, Wabes and the rest of the gang. So it's been there for decades now, maybe 20 years to thereabout.
Right.
So, and it's an incredible, force for change and progressive thought and ideas in the Nigerian system. And I support it entirely. And theoretically, whatever they're doing. But in praxis, that is theory in practice. It's going to be quite difficult to get to where you think they want to get to. Because the Constitution is very jealous. It's a jealous document. It prescribes the mood of its own change. So you cannot go outside the text, what they call the textualist reading of the Constitution, or the originalist intent of the Constitution to say, this is the only way you can change me. So if your referendum is not captured there, they must find a way to insert it into, to say, we break the referendum to decapitate the Constitution. We must delegitimize the Constitution in order to anyone to emerge. I thought about closure. So you have to topple it. You have to create a sense of space. If you don't have space, some vacuum, you can't put something where there's not vacuum.
Theoretically, that's not impossible, theoretically.
Well, I'm saying that theoretically it's not impossible, but I've given you the model, which I will repeat. I said the Fujimori model is the most potent, effective model. You go ask your readers to go and study the model. It's not me who say it on stage here. That's the model. It's there. So the point is, outside that model, what else can you do? The president is powerless. Look at the tax bills. The new tax base now we're not what he said. 70-80% were gone. By virtue of being watered down, that it was just like a survivor for the tax base because it would be humiliating for him. I said it on several stages. Because everything they wanted in that house, virtually everything was gone. Because the moment
well, I mean, that's not their own narrative.
and there is a narrative. I mean, if you check what the Senate and do you know how long it took? They wanted the tax bill done last year. This is May. That's over 8-7 months. But they wanted it in weeks. They find that ultimately, if you look at the VAT regime, if you look at other things, look at even the NASIMA, something. If you look at what is that? This education task for trust fund.
Tech fund.
What they want to do with it, and NASIMA and the rest of them gone. VAT remodeled it, recalibrated it to talk about where is the zone of derivation. Is it production? Is it consumption? If you take those fundamental, not the tiny details, the tactical issues there, that's even the tax bill. When they talk of the Constitution now, it's a lot more levels of contestation that is almost impossible to execute. But as I said, I'm part of the Patriots. I wish our group very well. But being a practical person, I can tell you that a lot more work needs to be done.
So how do we get there?
For some, how you get there is first and foremost, as I said, to have a counter-insurgency political movement. If you don't have that counter-insurgency movement,
What kind of movement that would be? I mean, another Nadeko?
no, a party seeking for power but of a unique type, they just don't have choice.
And
What they have is just one directional
and that's why I
politics.
said to you, Prof, that, and I know you've answered, but, it bears repeating that we need to have a kind of national consensus that goes beyond political parties, that goes beyond partisan politics, that goes beyond our ethnic differences, our religious differences. Our elite have to champion something like that. Some kind of democracy development baggage.
It's difficult to champion that because interests are deeply rooted. And interests are not just ephemeral, normative interests or moral interests, they're material interests. To prove those material conditions,
to protect those interests ultimately.
Yeah, to pull away those conditionalities of the interests people are protecting is almost impossible to call. So national consensus can always be reached, but within factions of the ruling political elite. But to have that kind of harmonious national consensus that is overarching and transcendent in nature, in which almost everybody now said, hallelujah, we are singing in one direction, is difficult to manage in a disordered, fragmented political system like ours.
Interesting. Last question, which is just just aligned to what we are talking about, is the constitutional change also. Do you think that it's time for us to actually abandon the presidential system? There is a bill in the National Assembly now that is saying that, look, let's have an homegrown parliamentary system.
That's essentially the thrust of our conversation at the beginning.
Right.
There is nothing anybody can do to rescue the presidential system from the mess it is already in. It's like an umbilical situation. It's tied to its origin. This system suffers from massive congenital abnormalities. That means no matter how you tinker with it and change it and amend it and retextualize or recontextualize it, it will never work. So the presidential system, the worrisome thing is not even from the political establishment, from the intellectual class. We need to hear a lot more intellectual force in terms of decapitating the logic of this presidential system. We need to find our scholars coming on stage, on studios and shows like this and beginning to really speak up.
I think the scholars have lost their voice.
That's one of the most incredible dilemmas of our generation. It's a tragic situation in which you find enormity of intellectual, reserve of strength at the various gowns. That is what they call the gown and the town.
Yeah.
But then increasingly depreciation of those voices because of the material circumstances people find themselves today. That is shocking. Because if you have an empowered intellectual base and space, you may find people giving damning verdict about the presidential system of government on a much more, effusive, and transient, manner.
Right.
If that is lacking, we just have to keep on wobbling through until possibly a historical accident. History is a composite force of accident and law-governed processes. The law-governed is there, but sometimes an accident will occur. An accident of history may be what to rescue the nation from the current turbulent, fluid state we find ourselves in.
Excellent conversation, Prof. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the intellectual output, and your zeal, to push Nigeria in the right direction. Hopefully, we'll get a break one day.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
It's a pleasure to be with you, man.
Thank you.